In Tokyo, Japan, there is one ramen shop I think that anyone that is visiting needs to try because it is just so historically and culturally important to ramen as a whole. To understand why this restaurant's ramen is so vital to try, we need to understand the history of ramen to begin with. What many people don't know is that ramen at its core isn't exclusively Japanese. The word itself, ramen, derives from the Chinese word ramyeon, which means Chinese pulled noodles. An interesting thing about its name though is that ramyeon itself is not the noodle used for ramen. It uses Cantonese-style cut noodles rather than pulled noodles. We actually don't really know when ramen started being named this way because, for example, in Seiichi Yoshida's How to Prepare Delicious and Economical Chinese Dishes, released in 1928, they used the term ramen correctly to identify ramyeon. One of the most accepted theories is that Japanese colonizers had misapplied the name ramyeon. After World War II, many Japanese settlers, particularly ones from the Japanese colony of Manchukuo in Manchuria, probably superficially called Cantonese-style dishes ramen because they looked like the northern-style ramyeon they found in their colony. And eventually, in 1958, Nissin Chicken Ramen was created by Momofuku Ando, and so the term ramen as we know it today became more popular to use across the country. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but the main reason for this etymology bit is to understand that ramen at its core is from the interactions, both good and bad, of Japanese and Chinese cultures. To find the origins of ramen, we first look at the city of Yokohama, which has its own Chinatown that has a majority of Cantonese and Shanghainese immigrants, who either came here or were descended from people that were doing trade at the seaports that opened in the mid-1800s. According to Barack Kushner's Slurp, A Social and Culinary History of Ramen, Japan's favorite noodle soup, the development of ramen by historians is widely accepted to be because of these immigrants in Chinatown. Chinese cuisine was particularly in high demand among students who missed the cuisine of their homeland and found Japanese food bland by comparison. In idea, it's very similar to how Italian pizza developed in America. American pizza was created by Italian immigrants in New York, but through a combination of different factors, you get a regional variant. Due to the growing popularity of the dish, the first specialized ramen shop opened in 1910 by Kanachi Ozaki called Rairaiken. Now, Ozaki himself was actually Japanese, but since he grew up in Yokohama, he experienced and tasted Chinese cuisine firsthand. Based on this picture I found from the Sora News 24 article, I am willing to assume he was very involved with the Chinese community. Anyway, for Rairaiken, Kanachi Ozaki recruited 12 Cantonese cooks from Yokohama Chinatown to open the first specialized ramen shop, according to ramen expert Hiroshi Osaki. Rairaiken was so popular that it's said that the restaurant had 2,500 to 3,000 customers daily. Now, the Rairaiken store was there for more than 30 years, temporarily closed due to the chaos of World War II, and then reopened again near what we know now as Tokyo Station. After moving again in 1965 to the Kanda neighborhood, it unfortunately closed since no one in Ozaki's family would take on the family business. Interestingly, when ramen was first introduced, despite now being a national treasure and an integral part of its culinary culture, it wasn't popular with Japanese people at the time. According to George Solt's The Untold History of Ramen, How Political Crisis in Japan Spawned the Global Food Craze, ramen was actually looked down upon by the Japanese because of racial discrimination against the Chinese, and it was considered an inexpensive working class food. However, after World War II, Japan had its worst recorded rice harvest in years, while simultaneously, US occupation provided cheap wheat flour for these food shortages. The large supply of wheat meant that there was an alternative food to rice that the Japanese could eat, and simultaneously, many Japanese colonizers returned from China but still preferred the Chinese cuisine, which no doubt contributed to the growing popularization of ramen as a dish in Japan. In fact, the existence of jiaozi turning into gyoza is very similar. Many repatriated Japanese people still loved the jiaozi they had overseas and decided to recreate it as gyoza in Japan. All of this historical context is important to understand as to why I think this ramen restaurant is so important for people to go to. So in 2020, Ozaki's grandson and great-great-grandson reopened the original Rairaiken inside the Shin Yokohama Ramen Museum. Kanachi's grandson, Kunio Takahashi, very closely helped recreate the first-hand experience of eating at the Rairaiken location, and based on his first-hand experience of eating there, researchers determined the ingredients and toppings used for the original recipe. This Sora News article keeps going on and on about how much research they did, the estimations on the types of ingredients used, and the level of effort they went into creating the dish, but here's the thing. This is not the restaurant I'm talking about. In 1933, Fu Xinglei, who was one of the original 12 cooks at the original Rairaiken, opened a second location by the same name in Utenji, Tokyo, and is still there to this day. That's what I don't understand personally. They keep talking about how they spent all this time researching and taking the first-hand experiences of the owner's grandson and yada yada yada, but they literally could have just taken a train down to the second location to find out. This isn't the only time where the existence of Rairaiken Utenji is seemingly left out. In the anime Miss Koizumi Koizumi loves ramen noodles, she talks about the history of ramen in episode 7 and the existence of the first Rairaiken location in Asakasa. In the episode arc, they don't really talk about Rairaiken's closures, but Koizumi still goes to the location where now stands Yoroya Ramen, which you can visit in real life, but no mention again about the Rairaiken in Utenji. I feel like an anime about a ramen enthusiast would at least try to acknowledge and make note of this, right? That's the weird thing too. In the anime, she claims that the owner tries to maintain that authentic taste from the first Rairaiken, but there's clearly a better candidate to find that taste she's looking for. Even when I look at pictures from the real Yoroya Ramen, the pictures are definitely promising, but still very different from what I experienced as the original recipe. The Utenji location isn't even like a niche discovery. All I did was a quick Google search to see if there was any Rairaikens that are still standing, and that came up immediately. Like I said, it even shares the same name, so I don't know why it's so seemingly left out all the time. You'd think that a ramen museum and an anime that talks about how much the main character loves ramen would at least acknowledge this second location, right? All of this makes me raise an eyebrow at the very least. Like, is there some drama with the second restaurant we don't know about? Are they trying not to give the Chinese cooks their due credit? I can only speculate, obviously, but it is on this principle I decided it's not worth visiting the ramen museum in Yokohama. They made such a big deal about recreating the recipe, but all the advertising just seems to omit the fact that Rairaiken Utenji still exists with the original recipe. It's not even like the restaurant has a different name. It's literally called Rairaiken as well, but this is why I decided that Rairaiken Utenji is the most important ramen for people to try. So I hopped on a train to see for myself. The setting for the restaurant feels very distinctively Chinese. I literally felt like I was in a Cantonese restaurant back in LA when I came in. The only thing that reminded me I was in Japan was literally all the Japanese text and people speaking Japanese. If you're visiting and not a native speaker, it might be a little bit intimidating because I don't think they had an English menu. They didn't even offer us one, but if you just sit there with a little bit of Google Translate, you should be able to figure it out. And besides, if we're going here, we're here for one thing only: ramen, which is written in katakana rather than kanji, so it should be significantly easier to spot and point at. Also, I gotta say, 800 yen for a bowl of ramen? That's how you know the food's gonna be good. Like, this place clearly hasn't been hit with the tourist craze yet. Not that I support gatekeeping or anything like that, but the cheap price and the mellow service is something that feels like is slowly going away as time goes on in Tokyo. To find this restaurant was an absolute treat in that regard as well. It also kind of helps because there's not a whole lot of things to do in Utenji as far as I know, so it's really out of the way for most tourists. So anyone that's going there is probably gonna go specifically for the ramen. I decided to get the version with pork strands in it, but my friend had the OG ramen, so I was able to try both. The result? It was the most delicious bowl of ramen I've ever had in my entire life. I don't know if I was just biased at the time because it was also raining outside, but there was just so much flavor, yet it was so light at the same time. I feel like, personally, a big problem with a lot of modern renditions of ramen is that it's just so packed with ingredients in this thick broth that it just feels too heavy. Rarely do I feel like I can actually finish a bowl of ramen before it starts to get too much. In the original ramen, the addition of onions is actually quite interesting. I felt like it helped add a distinct flavor to it. Again, because modern ramen packs so many different ingredients, it's hard to appreciate the individual tastes, but in this version, I could really taste the onion in the soup that made it that much more flavorful. To me, it certainly was like a case of less is more. I didn't take too many videos, especially because Japan is very big on privacy, so I didn't want to disturb the people around me too much, but I did take a recording of this signage as well that basically said that this is, in fact, the original Rairaiken recipe. Again, very interesting how the ramen museum didn't seem to consult this place, nor did they mention it at all when boasting about how they recreated the recipe from scratch. I didn't record this moment either, but when I was paying out, I did ask the server that was helping us if this really was the first ramen recipe. I think in Japanese it's something like "Sumimasen, koko no ramen wa hontou ni ichiban desu ka?" Something like that. He was incredibly nice and he was just nodding, saying that in English, this is a 90-year-old recipe, and it's just so amazing to taste something that's been so untouched by time. I'm serious, if you love ramen, this is a place you definitely have to try out. There's just so much history to its flavors, and it's so distinctly different from what ramen has evolved to today that it's just such a unique experience. This is coming from someone that generally doesn't like ramen. I usually like udon, pho, or some other type of like Asian noodle, but this was the best meal that I remember the most fondly during my trip to Japan. And obviously, when you come back home and talk to people about the ramen you had, you can go, actually, and talk about the history and the flavors you found behind the dish. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. I know it's a little bit different from the other type of long form content I make, but I'm kind of just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks, so I really appreciate if you stuck around for this. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.